Okay, so I've chosen the colours and I've drawn myself a very rough plan of the quilt, which probably doesn't mean much to you, but it means a lot to me. I've decided to do the squares in kind of a diamond arrangement. Obviously it'll be more central than that in the final thing, just because I think it makes it look a bit more interesting, rather than just being a square quilt full of squares. It's going to be a square shaped quilt with diamonds in the middle, which is still squares. I've chosen materials. I've chosen these colours, which I think will look beautiful together. And they have lots of lilacs and purples, which is what Sarah really likes. I've cut out the centrepiece, which is going to be just one 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch square of material, and then I'm going to build everything up around that. In order to make it look more interesting, I'm going to try something I've not done before, and I'm going to attach the darker pieces of material together, cutting randomly between them, and the lighter pieces of material together, and then I will do concentric squares of light and dark alternating to see how that looks. Okay, so you can see that I've sewn together some of the purple, darker purple strips. I've chopped some of them to make them interesting lengths, and I'm just going to stitch them around my centrepiece once I'm ready to see what effect that will have. I think it'll be quite nice. So this is my centrepiece. I've got a big handful of the paler colours, which I'm going to sew together in the same way, and I thought that I would give you a little look into how I'm going to do that. So here's my sewing machine. I can set this up. Hopefully you'll be able to see. So I'm going to do something called chain piecing, where you piece two pieces together under your machine. Then you leave the foot down and you leave it under the machine. Prepare the right sides together for the next piece. And then you can put it under the foot again without having to move the original piece. So I've sewn all my pieces together, and I just wanted to show you what they're like when you've chain pieced them. So I'm going to cut the thread on my machine and show you that they're all linked together because of how we sewed them. So all I have to do is to cut through these links with scissors, which is difficult when you're holding a camera. Here we go, and then they'll become one long strip of fabric. So what I've been doing is I've got my centrepiece here, and I've just gone round the edge once for each side with the pale colours, and then round the edge once with the darker colours, and I've started again with the paler colours. I'm just going to iron it flat. My quilt top's coming together quite nicely now. I'm still alternating the pale, excuse me, the pale and the dark. I've just stitched another dark piece on. We're now going a little bluer, which is good because I'm going to fade into the blue. So I'm just going to gently press with my iron, which helps keep it flat and makes it much easier to stitch together. So there you can see the changing between colours gives it kind of quite a nice funky sort of a pattern. You can see I've done the dark on this side and on this one, but I've still got dark to add to the other two. I'm quite pleased with it so far, and I've been thinking about what quilting designs I would like to do. And I think what would look really good is like a spiral from the centre, one following the shape of the squares, and then another spiral following the shape of the quilt, which will be more this sort of an angle. which I think would look really good and be nice and soft and comfortable to sit under as well, because if you quilt too close together it becomes a bit stiff and a bit uncomfortable. So that's my plan. So it's now getting pretty big. It's getting towards the sort of size where I'm considering how many more layers to do. So at the moment I think it's looking like I need to do 3, maybe 4 more rows around the edge. I don't want to make it too big because it seems to be my speciality is becoming a little too large, but I'm quite pleased with it. I think it's looking quite nice, quite like a log cabin actually, which is one of the designs that my friend liked. So I'll just keep going. It's now going into the blue, which is lovely, and it's coming along nicely. It's now getting pretty difficult to put it under my machine. If I use my new ruler, I've been measuring it using my lovely long ruler. This ruler is 24 inches long, so you can see how big the quilt is. It's maybe 30 inches at this point. Okay, so I've forced myself to stop with the quilt top. It's now reached about 43 inches square, which is a little bit bigger than she wanted it, but I think it looks really nice and I'm really reluctant to take anything off the edges, and I think 43 inches is a pretty good size for a lap quilt. So this is the finished top. It's turned out quite well, I think, if I do say so myself. Next step is to attach this to the rest of the sandwich, which is the batting or wadding, and the backing, which is the lovely batik. I'm going to do it using a fusible spray which washes off in the washing machine after you've quilted it, so that it stops it moving around while you quilt the quilt itself under the machine. Keeps all the layers nice and together, and then it washes off and doesn't cause any residue or any problems to the material afterwards. Okay, so I lied, it's not finished. I've laid it out on the floor and I remembered I was going to turn it so that it wasn't just a square in a square. I was going to change it so that it was on an angle, like a diamond, which I think is much nicer to look at actually. So I've marked up, I don't know if you can see that, marked up my fabric with a soluble pen to try to find the middle and make sure that my diamonds are in the middle, because that would upset me. And I'm going to chop off a little bit of the corners, and then I'm going to build up the missing area to turn it into the right shape again. This is the finished quilt top. I'm very happy with it. I think it looks really good now that I've turned it round and added the corners on. I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. The only thing is, it is a bit bigger than it was supposed to be, because everything I make seems to do that. It's about 45 inches square, which I mean isn't huge compared to some of the 110-inch square quilts that I've made. It turned into monsters, but it is still a little larger than it was supposed to be. But I mean, what bit would you cut off? It's very difficult to trim it back once it ends up like this. So I was quite careful at the beginning. I bought wadding that's only 45 inches across, so it couldn't possibly be any bigger than 45 inches to stop myself going huge. And it seems to have paid off, because it's pretty much exactly the same size as the quilt tops turned out. So the next step will be putting it all together, making the sandwich and sticking it together with the adhesive spray so that I can draw on a pattern and start quilting it.